Help the Crowd Shot Radio Show grow and thrive by doing something you already do. Shop on Amazon. Amazon always has great deals for whatever you are looking for. From survivalists and riot gear to beanie babies. Next time you're going to shop at Amazon, use my link. The prices stay the same, but I get credit for the sale. Just go to tinyurl.com/LouisB and just shop normally, knowing that you're helping support the Crotch Shot Radio Show. That's tinyurl.com/LouisB.
Warning.
This show contains mature content. Listener discretion is advised.
Are you ready to get your mind blown?
One angry New York City Puerto Rican decided to start a radio show. Determined to piss the world off by shoving a mirror in front of society's face, he kicked them in the balls.
What are you? Who are you?
This is the Crotch Shot Radio Show. Crotch Shot Radio Show.
This is not a test. This is a broadcast transmission.
We're going to stay on the air.
And now, Louis B.
Welcome to the Crotch Shot Radio Show, where we kick the issues in the balls. We're on an active war against bullshit. We would do anything and everything to expose bullshit. The end sometimes justify the means. So if you're angry and want the truth exposed, then strap in and prepare to be shocked. This is Smash Mouth Talk. If you can't accept that, then fuck off. I'm your host, Louis B. I takes no crap from nobody. I actually expose the bullshit of society and chop it up into easy to digest chunks for you. Today will not be any different. Today, I am honored to have another libertarian on this show. I have Devin Balkind. He is a candidate for New York City Public Advocate. Devin, how are you doing?
Fabulously. It's Devin Balkind.
Balkind.
A lot of people, a lot of different ways to say the name.
Balkind.
I've never heard that one though, but
I said Balkind, didn't I?
What, something like that.
Oh,
sounds like some type of country.
Yeah.
Maybe an island?
Yes,
Falkland Islands?
the Balkans, in the former Yugoslavia.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. So, my first question is, what is a public advocate?
So the public advocate's a rare. Really, only New York has a public advocate. It comes from a history in which the public advocate used to be the president of the city council, and then they had to restructure the city council because the New York City government was ruled unconstitutional in 1989 because it didn't have enough proportional representation for its leadership. I could get into that if you want, but basically what the public advocate's supposed to do is be an ombudsperson that holds the government accountable to the people, and that's the way it's supposed to do that is by organizing information. If you read through the city charter that authorizes the creation of the public advocate, it's basically a job that, it's supposed to organize the city's information so the public can understand what's going on and provide oversight. The public can provide oversight. The public advocate can provide oversight. The other roles that the public advocate's supposed to do is basically to gather complaints from residents of New York about the city government and to monitor the services that the government's providing to the city government. So quite frankly, it's a fabulous position for a libertarian because it's supposed to be oppositional to the government. It's supposed to say to the government, hey, you're doing this wrong, that wrong, and that wrong, and here's how you can save some money. Of course, that's not how things have been playing out in New York City, where the city's controlled by a Democratic Party machine that, let's just say, hasn't made the public advocate particularly oppositional to the mayor or to the existing power structure here.
So let me ask this question: as a libertarian living in New York City, why is like the ruling class that are the party that's the ruling class in New York City, Democrats. Why hasn't anyone noticed how wasteful they are and how not with their interest there?
Well, people notice it. Even just a few days ago, there was a story about how $2 billion was being spent on overtime pay that may or may not be necessary. The city has an $85 billion a year expense budget and a $15 billion a year capital budget. So we're spending about $100 billion a year. Oh. It's a big city. It's the nation. I mean, it's a big city. It's a complicated city. And, for all of the progressive talk that the politicians kind of dole out and give out and, display, the real estate industry is still, gets what it wants in this city. Development is happening. It's happening aggressively. If you compare New York City's approach to development versus a place like California, New York City looks a lot less, progressive, quote unquote, than California does. I mean, we're building a lot here, and so and our government's relatively functional. I mean, it spends a lot of money, it taxes a lot, it spends a lot, but people appreciate that the city is it's a big place, it's a complicated place, and the thing still runs. And also, one of the biggest issues in New York City is the fact that New York City is 8 million people. The New York City metro area is like 25 million people. And those 25 million people are spread between 3 different states, basically Connecticut and northern New Jersey and New York and New York City and upstate New York. And so we're completely politically cut up. We're politically divided. If we had a metro regional government, we could have the national political power of a place like California, but we don't. We're all split up. And so New York State dominates New York City politics and, exploits, takes our money and, invests it and spends it in weird ways. And we have to work with the New York State government to get a lot of stuff done in New York City. For example, New York City's subway system is run by New York State.
Yeah.
And if you look at a map, I mean,
in fact,
New York City doesn't even look like it should be part of New York State. It should be part of New Jersey or Connecticut. It's crazy.
Or its own state, like Bloomberg tried to do.
And I think that there's a lot of interesting. If we look at other models for how the borders could be redrawn, if New York City had a metro government, like a metro area government, 25 million people, I mean, it would be the biggest. It would be massive. I mean, it could operate at the scale of California, which I think is something that's really interesting. Of course, it's not something that politicians are generally talking about, but it's an interesting thing to think about, and it's also an interesting thing. I think that politicians should be talking about it more, because if we can work better with, suburban, northern New Jersey and Connecticut, we should be able to, we need to build a mechanism to kind of bring a little competition to the governance question. If New York State thought that, if New York had 20 years to organize a metro area government, we could do it. New York State would treat us a lot different if they thought that they were in a little bit of competition. And so I think there's a lot of, it's an interesting place. It's a dynamic place. I think.
Yeah, I mean,
as long as the subways are running, people are going to be generally happy. Of course, the subways are getting into some trouble.
I actually had Larry Sharp last week on the show. And we spoke a lot about the subway system, and and also about the MTA. He basically said stop tolling these bridges and just have private corporations sponsor these bridges, like instead of the Ed Koch Bridge, probably the Pornhub Bridge.
Well, I mean, listen, if you're looking at we're approaching, in the next 10 years, we're going to see a whole new set of opportunities when it comes to mobility. Transit is transforming. I mean, the subways, New York City's got the oldest subway. It's got the first subway system in the world. It's the oldest, which makes it the oldest subway system in the world. It's also one of the biggest, and it's also one of the only subway systems that's open 24 hours. So, I mean, it's a big job. When you're open 24 hours, that means you're going to have delays no matter what when you're doing construction.
That's also because the MTA, they have to give all their profits or whatever they're earning to the state, to upstate, and then the state.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the fact that upstate is controlling our mass transit system. I mean, it's not like if upstate. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And so, the problem, there are a lot of problems, when it comes to figuring out how to bring the MTA back into New York City's realm. so that the city can control its own mass transit system. But it's something that I'm surprised there isn't more political consensus about. The politicians don't talk about more, and this needs to be planned for. Like we need the subway system back. Like period.
Yeah, I mean it's. But the thing, what Larry Sharp was talking about was it's also because the MTA has bloated pension plans.
Well, listen, if you want to look at any bureaucracy that's operating basically a monopoly, you're going to see bloat, you're going to see waste, fraud, and abuse, you're going to see incompetence, you're going to see, an organization that's operating, often to serve its employees and the people who are getting a paycheck more than it's operating to serve its supposed customers who don't have a choice anyway,
Right.
And so when we look at, it's not just the MTA, there's a recognition that that I think is emerging in society, which is that these older institutions that were designed in an era of memos and fax machines, when fax machines were high tech, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
These old institutions are not structured to benefit from the advances in modern information management and communication technologies. I mean, if you were going to design a large organization to manage a subway system, if you're going to do that in an era where information is being passed on paper versus an era when everyone's having smartphones, you're going to design two very, very different organizations. And what I think we're seeing in all types of organizations all over the economy, whether they're, I think the for-profits, it's a little, they're a little more responsive. But any organization that's in a monopoly or near monopoly position, they aren't that responsive to changes in technology, so they can't benefit from these changes, and so they look increasingly inept and wasteful because they are in comparison to what anyone can do now with a shared spreadsheet and a smartphone.
Yeah, I mean, I heard this joke. I forgot who said it. It's like, why the hell do I care about free Wi-Fi in the subway station if I could just get to where I gotta go real quick? Oh man, how did it go?
Well, it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to give people free Wi-Fi so they can keep listening to their music and reading emails and stuff and playing around on Snapchat than it is to get people places faster.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm a big fan of the. I'm happy they brought the Wi-Fi into the stations. It's a little cool. Like that's what most subway systems have. I'm not gonna.
Yeah,
but too aggressively.
Yeah, I mean, but if I could get on the train and get to work under 30 minutes, who gives a crap about Wi-Fi if I'm not going to be standing in the station for that long?
Listen, I agree.
Yeah.
And New Yorkers love to complain about the subway. I've traveled a lot though, and I have to tell you, New York City subway system is smelly and it's ugly, but the thing runs 24 hours a day, all the lines. And it's pretty impressive. I mean, you spend time, been to Tokyo, I've been to Northern Europe, been to a lot of places, been to China. 24 hours is hard to do. It's hard to do. So I got to give them credit that they're doing 24 hours, and that's about all the credit.
And plus, you get the free. Plus, the MTA is nice enough to give us free entertainment with Showtime.
Yeah, exactly. And so New Yorkers know how to turn a less pleasant situation into a slightly more pleasant situation. So, it's listen, the reason why I want to be public advocate is that I think that what we need, I work in information management, I work in software, often with large, complicated organizations. And I can tell you, if we started mapping out how the MTA spends its money, just hammering them for more transparency, getting people into kind of the mid-level getting consultants into the mid-level bureaucratic positions. I'm not talking about high-end corporate consultants from McKinsey. I'm talking about people who have a background in open source methodology and how to share information among peers. If we could get people, we could start bringing in people who know how to do things the new way, start getting information out of the MTA about how it's spending the money, how it's doing things. We could build not just a proposal, but we could start working collaboratively with the middle management there and with the people who actually get the work done in terms of the management and start helping them just do a better job and figuring out who in the MTA actually wants to do a better job in middle management. You know what I mean? The people who actually, not the people who go in front of the press conferences and not the people who sit around the board tables, but the people who actually day to day are moving the information and getting things done. If we can reach those people and help and show them how to use better tools, more efficient tools, how to just improve their productivity, not only are we going to be able to improve the performance of the MTA, we're also going to be able to identify who the leaders of the MTA need to be going forward. And that's the type of work. I do in disaster management. That's the type of work that I'd like to be doing as public advocate.
But what? So what specifically would be the libertarian solution to fix New York City?
So I think that. So I'm proposing something that I haven't started promoting it yet. But although if you go on my website, votedevin.com, you go to the blog, you'll see it. Something called big city libertarianism, and basically. The Libertarian Party, third biggest party in the country, by far bigger than the Greens, twice the size of the Green Party. And it doesn't have an urban agenda. It doesn't have policy that really speaks to the concerns of people who live in big cities. Maybe like 150 plus million Americans live in big cities, over half the population. So there's a giant market opportunity. There's a giant gap in where the libertarians are getting support. Where if they had an agenda that could appeal to city residents, they could grow rapidly. And so what I think that agenda has to be is basically accepting the fact that people in cities are opting to pay more in taxes to live in cities. That's just the way it is. And so this whole taxes are theft, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, fun philosophy conversation, guys. Like if we want to get power in cities, then we have to accept the fact that, city residents are going to use more government services, are going to be paying more in taxes. That's just the reality. And people in cities they're more or less fine with that. If they weren't fine with that, they wouldn't be, Democrats, right? And so what we need to be is the party of innovation, the party of openness and government transparency and bringing government to the people and allowing the government to work with the public so that the difference between the government and the public kind of dissipates. And enable and bring basically an open source methodology to how governments run. Are you familiar with open source as a thing?
Only when it comes to Linux.
Yeah, exactly. So let's imagine Linux is exactly the thing. I'd like to see the Libertarian Party adopt
In fact,
a lot more.
In fact, I'm running Linux Mint right now. I mean,
Yeah, dude, I'm on Ubuntu.
Ubuntu to me is just too much bloatware.
Yeah, there's a little bit of bloat. Don't get me wrong.
I run Linux.
Oh my gosh, this is about to become a Linux conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I run Linux. I'm like, look, I'm not a coder. I did it I installed it myself because I know how to read.
Yeah. You know how to read. You know how to copy. You're not afraid to copy a command and paste it into a terminal window.
I know what if something goes wrong, I know how to run a search and see. Oh, somebody else solved it already. But
all right, so I will tell you this.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Linux is. We need to spread awareness about Linux among libertarians because within Linux, in so many different ways, is the answer to how we win power.
How so?
And I can start going through it.
Go ahead.
Linux is about sovereignty, right? So we should be expecting right now the government. Most of the government's job is information management. At the end of the day, they're moving information. They're making decisions. They're figuring out where to spend money, how to do this, how to do that. But a lot of it's information management. Right now, that information is being managed by and sold to random corporations controlled by who knows who, maybe Americans, maybe not Americans, and they're doing a terrible job. Like our healthcare system is kind of collapsing because our hospitals aren't using computer systems that interoperate. And so if we were running on a Linux-based model for how government runs and how computers, how the government computers run, then our information would be very, very easy to organize and share. It would be very easy to say, hey, the government needs to be transparent. Here's all the well-formatted data that comes from standardized free software, and we could be able to just pop in and see exactly what's happening within the government. The other thing, and so from a very functional level, right now, New York City's government needs to move from being dependent on Windows and Microsoft Corporation and have its own Linux distribution that it uses for the vast majority of its stuff. They should be using it in schools. They should be using it in government offices. It would be faster, better, and cheaper than these giant Microsoft systems that cost tons of money and bring vendor lock-in. And what vendor lock-in is, vendor lock-in means it costs money to leave a vendor. So right now, if the city wanted to change its computer systems, it would take, not only are they on contracts that have to wait to expire, but then it would take them that have to do what's called, that have to extract, transfer, and load like so much data. It would cost so much money for them to like go through this process. And so, so there's a big cost for them to switch off. So they're basically addicted to like pretty crappy corporate software that they shouldn't be addicted to. And the worst part of that isn't just that, it's a bad product for, a high price. It's that to change the software, to change the way the government works, they basically have to ask permission to some random corporation, some random, account executive has to be processing requests from the government agencies it's like, oh, hey, we've reorganized how this department works. Now we don't need those fields in the database anymore. We don't need that part of the workflow. We need this part. They have to make that change, to implement that change in the computer system is something that can't even really happen. It makes it very expensive, very hard to make it happen. And people who are in the government who actually know the changes that need to be made don't have the authority to go to the corporate service provider and change the thing. And so ultimately what it means is that like our innovation is only, is being restrained, like our city's ability to innovate and save money and do better is being restrained by these like weird contracts that don't make sense to the vast majority of the public. And so, yes, if we took the open source methodology, if we were just using more open source software, things would start getting a little bit more flexible and a little easier. But Linux is also a very complicated. It's a very, very complicated piece of software. It's being used in your Android phone. It's being used on your and my computers. Yep. It's being used on the Internet of Things. All these small embedded chipsets. They're all running Linux. Like Linux is winning, and it's because it's free. And there is a huge community of people who are doing extremely, extremely valuable work for very little money. They're doing it because they want to do it, most of them. I mean, a lot of them are getting paid by corporations now to improve Linux, but that wasn't the way it started. And so they're doing it because they have a whole kind of peer-to-peer production methodology. I mean, they do things differently than a corporation does stuff. And so we need to look at how the Linux model, the model of peer-to-peer software development, peer-to-peer work, peer-to-peer collaboration allows us to transform the relationship between citizens and government, basically. And then we can start seeing what a more libertarian government looks like. It looks like a government that's open, transparent, and participatory, and that has and is basically run by the people, not because it has a supreme leader who's magically making all the right decisions, because he was the right person to vote in, but because the public's actually involved in day-to-day governance. And if we can achieve that vision, then even the whole idea of government begins to kind of, fade away. Government becomes governance. In governance, you don't need a coercive force to make people engaging in the act of governance, of governing themselves. You need people, you need good incentives, you need people to be aligned. And so we can start seeing, if we get more involved in that way, we can start seeing a way out of this situation where, like the people who have the monopoly on force, the government who is allowed legally to coerce us with violence, becomes less and less coercive and becomes, kind of begins to fade.
So, quick question. I mean, because with Linux, it's like you said, it's an open source. There's a huge community. Like, if you have a problem, like when I had a problem connecting my computer to wirelessly, I researched, and boom, there was there was a whole bunch of solutions to the answer. But that takes participation from a bunch of people to have developed the answer and all that. How will you get, I mean, and not to talk bad about my fellow New Yorkers, who are either too selfish, too lazy, or too busy to pay attention to the government now? How would you get like people like
it's a great question.
Democrats, like Democrats?
I have an answer for you.
Okay, there you go.
Basically, we need a new type of media. Right, there's something taking place in Taiwan right now. It's called V-Taiwan. It stands for like virtual Taiwan. Uh-huh. Basically, what it is when their Occupy movement happened a little later, and it happened, and they leveraged they basically took over Parliament, said, we're going to do meetings and we're going to do stuff better than you're doing it. They literally took over the physical building of Parliament, told Parliament, we're going to do things better, set up live streams and started debating the issues in Parliament. And the public was so enchanted by this that the public basically like gave them all their support, and the prime minister and like a lot of people in Taiwan's government were like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to capitulate to these people and let them implement the process that they're doing right now, like within our government. And so that's been happening in Taiwan for about 3 or 4 years now. Mm-hmm. And what they've produced is basically something that what they've produced is an interactive. They have apps, they have live stream broadcasts with like interactive qualities, and they have it facilitated in-person events. And all of these things are designed to allow the public to address an issue that they care about, whatever it is. So, one of the ones is like Uber regulation, regulating car services, whatever the issue is. Mm-hmm. They're doing lots of them. They're like, okay, what's the issue? And then they start using a process that they've developed to bring the public in to produce an interesting lot. Yeah, they have live stream. Like I said, they have live stream. They have theater. They have like theater shows. But they're basically doing all these different things to get the public to give feedback about what they think about this issue. They take all that feedback. They use some algorithm. They collect it in apps. They use some algorithms to display the feedback back to the public, so the public understands what the public thinks right now. They debate issues. They group like-minded people together. They come up with proposals, and those proposals are kind of what the government gets to then pick and choose from in terms of what it is they want to implement. And so what they've done is they've created not just a passive community of consumers of content, mm-hmm. but people who are actively producing proposals and solutions. And it's become it's become popular. It's become an interesting thing for people to spend their time on instead of whatever it is, watching whatever latest TV show it is. Some people are like, hey, I see how my opinion, how I can go through kind of an enriching experience. It's fun, that's not pretending like it's a boring government meeting, but is instead like an interactive event. And it's taking those, and it's mobilizing them to like put a lot of work in to come up with good proposals that they like. And then the public thinks, oh wow, we're actually not only we're not just being heard, like we're just a bunch of people yelling at a rally. They're like, we're actually making the policy. And so that, to me, is, a much more engaging... I mean, if we had a system like that in New York City, people would be engaged and interested, and, more people would be, and they'd mobilize more. And they'd get involved more. They'd actually just spend more time on it. And so I think, theoretically, we need that process over the course of many years so that we really figure out how to do it right. And it would be just a fun, interesting way to spend time. It would be a place where people met their future hookups or husbands and wives. It would be a place where people hang out with their friends and get it would become part of the culture. And I think that's the internet makes that possible. Mm-hmm. We just haven't seen it happen yet in the U.S. We should.
I mean, would you blame the fact that we're New York State or New York City government is stuck in its old ways, blaming why they haven't integrate more internet into internet for the people? Because it just seems like it's only recently that they've allowed you to start paying your taxes online and stuff.
Listen, the thing is, any bureaucracy that has little competition is going to take a long time to innovate and bring in new technologies, particularly any technology that's going to eliminate jobs. Mm. Right? A lot of these bureaucracies, their job, they exist to make sure they are filled with people who want to keep their jobs.
Right.
And so how are you going to advance in a bureaucracy, get the support of your peers in a bureaucracy, and become a leader in a bureaucracy if you're the one who's cutting the jobs of all the people around you? Right? Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen. So they're very resistant to change. But this isn't something that's unique to New York. This is something that is endemic in big bureaucracies with limited competition, no matter where and how. And so it's the public, if we had people like the public advocate really explaining how the bureaucracy needs to change itself, not by going up and making speeches about how things need to change, but by actually saying hey, you know, like in this workflow, like you should really X, Y, and Z should actually be in A and B. And like, oh, yeah, you know, I saw in your contract that you're paying this much money for payment processing. Well, you could be paying 50% less if you used this provider and this system and made it easy online, you know? And so what we need is that type of renegade consultancy going into government and figuring out where the opportunities are. Because if not, or because, you know, without that, the people who want to do the reform in these bureaucracies and in these agencies, you know, they don't have the political support internally to get the stuff done that they know needs to get done because people want to keep their jobs and they don't want to change the work that they do. You know, even in corporate America, which has a huge you know, incentive to increase the bottom line and cut costs. You know, they hire consultants, they hire outside consultants all the time, not to come up with new ideas, you know, that they never thought of, but to create a political opportunity that allows them to make changes within their organization. You know, they don't hire they know when they hire consultants to kind of downsize a bit, you know, to figure out who's, you know, expendable in a business, you know, how to restructure, you know, who to fire. You know, a lot of these corporations, they know what they want to do. They know what the restructuring should look like. But by pushing the responsibility of the consultants to say it, then they get to say, hey, I don't want to do this, but the consultants say it's the best thing to do, and like the board says that we need to listen to the consultants, and so, you know, and that's how they get shit done. That's how they get stuff done. Beep. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, I think that we need to bring that attitude. We need to bring that type of. We need to bring an open source methodology to all this stuff, and that's how we're going to get results. Without an open source methodology, we're not going to be able to reform the bureaucracy. Period.
All right.
I haven't seen
Do you think that there's too many regulations when it comes to doing business in New York City?
Not only are there too many regulations, of which there way too many, but the regulations are opaque. And so one of the things my campaign did, we built a really little website, laws.votedevin.com. And we took the administrative code of the city and the charter of the city and put it into kind of a standard open source document management, like a docs viewer. It's called Read the Docs. It's what a lot of open source software projects use to just put up their documentation. Because I was looking for, you know, the administrative code in the city, which is the code that explains like all of the different all the different things that the agencies are supposed to do. Couldn't find it in a format that allowed me to copy a URL, you know, and paste the URL and then have someone else go to that same page. Instead, it's in these weird old systems that don't make any sense. And so when it comes to regulation, you know, step one, yes, first of all, in general, there's just too much regulation. It doesn't make sense. Step two, you know, recognizing that's important. But step two is recognizing that we need to make it really, really easy to understand what regulation exists, why it exists, and allow the public to express whether or not they think it should still exist. And this is something, when I think of how to do that, like I think of SimCity. You ever play SimCity?
No. No.
Well, I highly recommend SimCity as a video game, especially if you're interested in like urban politics. There's kind of like a knockoff version that's available on Steam called Cities Skyline, which is also good. But what's so amazing about these games is that they provide an interface. You see a visual interface that explains to you how a city is working in real time. And, you know, you're managing the city, and of course the city is virtual. But they have a lot of good ideas in those games about how, how to explain what's happening in a city to the public. And so one of the things they have is like a checklist for all the ordinances that exist, basically all the regulations that exist in the city. And you hover over one of these items on the checklist, and it's like, okay, this is the reason why this thing exists. This is how much it costs. This is the benefits. This is the cost. This is the reasoning. Click it on, click it off. How hard would it be for us to literally just take all of the regulations in New York City? There are a lot of them, but like we have computers. It's cool. We can figure out how to do this. Take all the regulations, make a giant checklist using that same type of design, and then ask New Yorkers to just say what they think should be on and what should be off. Let them go. Let them click. Let them submit it, and then we'll have some numbers. We'll have some feedback from the public being like, oh, yeah, maybe the cabaret law is a terrible idea. Maybe people should be allowed to dance in bars, particularly considering that people are dancing in bars all over the city, right? Like, and so we can do things, like the public advocate should be doing things like that, making those little checklists and then prompting the public to give some feedback. And if we did, we'd have a really powerful weapon in our fight against stupid regulations that don't make any sense and that just are just on the books because people don't know they exist. They're too lazy to, because we're too lazy to change them as a society. We're too lazy to update them.
Yeah, but the thing is, we have all these politicians that are always promising, oh, well, we're going to create jobs. We're going to make it very hospitable for businesses to bring jobs here. But wouldn't it be in their best interest to get rid of a lot of these worthless, job killing and also, expense causing regulations, so that way more businesses sprout up or current businesses make more money and let's face it, pay more taxes.
You're being rational right now. Right?
Sorry.
That's a rational argument.
Sorry. I didn't mean don't mean to be rational on this show.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have to right now, like, the political class is stuck in, we exist in a representative democracy where people are getting elected to kind of every 4 years to then go off and do what they think should be done. If we were living in a more like in a direct democracy, in a participatory democracy, where the public is constantly being polled, right, is constantly being asked what they think it should be done, and the government, and the system, and the politicians are basically subordinate to the outcomes that the public, that the public's expressing, then a lot of the existing politicians, they won't want to be politicians anymore. That's not a job they want. They want to be people who are getting elected to, quote unquote, solve problems, theoretically. Of course, they're not really solving many of these problems, but they're the type of people who can get elected to, quote unquote, solve the problems. They don't want to be facilitators who actually just perform what the public expresses its will to be. And so, yeah, it's kind of they're we're going to do all this stuff, always. We're always going to do this stuff, and it's always kind of the same stuff. We're going to ensure every kid has a great education. We're going to make sure everyone has a good job. We're going to but this stuff never happens, right? And then they use this language like we're kids. Yeah. You're going to ensure every kid has a good education on day one. That's language they use. On day two, I want to be like, wow, I don't believe anything you say because you said you were going to ensure, 1.2 million New York City kids are going to have a good education, and on day two, you didn't do it. You said you were going to do it on day one. They talk to us like we're kids. They talk to us like we're not prepared to hear the truth. And the truth is that we have giant bureaucracies that are very hard to hold to account, that the mayor can't, restrain, that the mayor doesn't even have that much control over, and that they haven't figured out how to reform these big institutions to get the type of results and performance that is available in a lot of, that we're seeing increasingly emerge in our smartphones from the companies that are producing apps on our smartphones. And so they don't want to, they don't know what the solution is. And the solution, I really truly believe, is open source methodology. But they don't know that, they don't express that, they don't really understand that, and so they're just playing the same old, they're just doing what works. If you do A/B ad testing, if you do ad testing on what words work to get people to click on a thing, you see, it's these words work. So they're just kind of going through and using the same words, doing the same old stuff, pretty much over and over again. And they get the result, and the results that they get are that they keep getting elected. And so until we really change we
gotta tax the 1/4%, and we're gonna give you all that money.
Yeah, we're gonna tax
that was
the rich people more so that they don't. We're gonna tax rich people more so that even more of them, don't want to have a primary residence in New York, and then we're gonna give this money to an institution that has proven itself to be terrible at managing money and producing a product at a decent product at a low price.
Yeah, I mean that's right? the one thing.
That's what they're saying. Yeah. And so in a certain way, it makes sense. I would like to see. Listen, there are a lot of rich people in New York City, and I would like to see the MTA improve. Yeah. I want a better subway, and it makes sense that rich people who it makes sense to give the public, everybody, a better mass transit system by inconveniencing a few rich people. That I understand that logic, but all that stuff is kicking the can down the road, and the road is significant bureaucratic reform, and and they don't know how to do it, and so they kind of ignore it and they throw money at it.
All right. I mean, I personally don't. I mean, I get again, I'm being I'm being rational here. Sorry. Uh, you know, you want to make it hospitable for people to be here, like both rich and middle class.
And poor people. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, they listen. Poor folks too. I mean, it's everybody. It should be everybody. You know, people talk about the right to the city. You know, and I grew up in Manhattan. I was born in Manhattan. You know, and
Let me guess.
I grew up,
Chelsea.
don't get me wrong.
Chelsea.
Huh? What was that?
Are you a Chelsea kid?
I grew up on the Upper West Side.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah. I'm not trying to pretend like I'm not. I didn't pull
look at
myself
you.
up by my bootstraps here.
Look at you.
You know what I mean?
Look how
But, like,
hoity-toity you are.
yeah, exactly. Where's my?
I'm from.
sipping on my. Well, I made my cold brew iced coffee myself. So
Look at you.
Yeah.
Cold brew.
I'm a self-reliant individudualist over here.
I drink water like a homeless. No, so, I'm a born and raised Williamsburg, Brooklyn boy. Before it got gentrified.
Yeah, for sure. I got friends who were born and raised in Williamsburg too. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, when you're from New York, like if you're born here, like I don't think you should be, I understand the right to the city concept, and and as a libertarian, this is where I think big city libertarianism becomes important. People should be able to stick around in New York. Like you shouldn't have to work for a Fortune 500 company, to be able to live in the place that you grew up, And so, I believe that it's a big place. Building buildings is possible. It's something that people do all the time, And so, when it comes to affordable housing, which if I can pivot to that a bit, because that's something that they talk about all the time in the the debates and all that. One of the things they don't talk about, the way that they're building affordable housing is they're basically giving huge tax incentives to real estate developers through very convoluted processes that both raise the cost, that make it difficult for people who don't develop buildings in New York to develop buildings in New York, right? Because they just don't know the weird bureaucratic process to get those subsidies. And ultimately, it's just the city giving money to big real estate corporations. What if? Now, I'm not saying that this is the answer, but I'm saying the type of thing that we should be considering is, vouchers for people who grew up in New York City. Instead of giving all this money to big real estate companies to build buildings, why don't we give people in New York who grew up here vouchers so that they can so that their housing can be subsidized, so that Russian oligarchs and Chinese millionaires and whatnot who are buying up all this real estate and pushing up prices, plus every bored Midwestern kid who wants to work hard, doesn't mean that they have to move to wherever, Baltimore or something. We're not even the progressives who you would think would be interested in that type of idea. They're not even thinking about that type of stuff. And that to me seems like the type of solution, like a basic income style concept that at least should be in the public discourse when we talk about affordable housing, which maybe, libertarians don't spend that much time talking about affordable housing. Everybody else is talking about affordable housing all the time in this political process. And so I think, we need new ideas, and we need ideas that are inexpensive, to implement, to administer. I have, there's a company that gives, you could give every New Yorker a prepaid debit card and just through a computer program deposit cash on it. I mean, you could do it through their phones too. But instead, we have these giant bureaucratic, offices that use fax machines to give people benefits. You start getting into the benefits and the service provisioning in the city, and it's old school. And it costs a lot of money, and it's really inefficient, and people suffer because of it.
Right. Yeah, but shouldn't we be trying to get people off of it? Definitely. Don't get me wrong. We should definitely be trying to get people off of it. Yeah, because I read some articles that a lot of municipalities, they are switching from welfare to workfare. And what they've noticed is when people have to work for their benefits, they get off as quickly as possible. They end up finding themselves gainful employment.
I mean, in general, I agree. I think there's certain people, honestly, a lot of people you just don't want in the workforce, quite frankly. It's better, they will do more harm in the workforce, gumming up the work, stopping things from being efficient, being upset, getting injured, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people better just pay them up. Just make sure that they're okay. You know, I mean, this idea that we're especially as automation is beginning to kind of, we're at the dawn of like real serious automation.
Yeah.
You know, we're at the dawn of like the biggest professions in the country, drivers, food service, you know, becoming.
I really don't trust them driverless cars.
Well, one thing that will make you trust them more is that they're running Linux. They're going to be running Linux systems. It's not like they're going to be running Microsoft, you know, some like weird other thing. Like they're going to be running.
Yeah, but Linux could still
Linux
still crashes out. Linux could still be hacked.
Well, another problem. The real argument for driverless cars is that maybe 50 to 60,000 people a year die in accidents right now.
Yeah.
And so the only thing they have to do with the driverless car stuff is improve that by, you know, a factor of 2. And already, just even now, my understanding is if they scaled out driverless cars, you know, they're improving it by a factor. You'd have significantly less deaths already. And so it's going to get to a point, like they're going to be able to reduce the amount of road deaths by a factor of 10. You know, by the time driverless cars become
I don't know. We start letting Skynet infiltrate more and more of our world, man. You know, we're just
listen. I mean, I hear you. I mean, you know, right now, you know, a lot of these airplanes are basically, you know, using like advanced autopilots that are even, you know, they're doing landings, they're doing all this stuff. So, you know, the thing is technology is here to stay. People love it. You know, we like to complain about it, we like to talk about it. But people love the benefits. And what's really scary to me is that so few people in government are technologists, understand technology, understand where it's going. And so they're going to make terrible, terrible decisions about technology when they don't, you know, that they can't comprehend. You know, they can't comprehend a lot of this stuff. You know, so who is going to, the idea that these leaders without any technical experience, some of these people don't even have computers, don't really use email, you know? So these people are going to be making complicated policy decisions about autonomous cars. Like it's a bad idea. So we need to, you know, one of the reasons why I'm running is I really want to encourage technologists and people who understand technology to start running for office. Because if not, I mean, we're going to have a bunch of folks who just really don't understand the next frontier of regulation, making bad regulations that don't make any sense and hurt people. And so, you know, I don't know how we got to this topic exactly. Right. Oh, I remember, because of jobs. Yeah. Yes. So we need to, I would say because in the next 5 to 10 years, food service is going to take a big hit. There are going to be a lot less food service jobs. There are going to be a lot less driving jobs that involve driving. These are 2 of the biggest employment types of jobs in the country. And so we are going to have to explore how to make sure everyone's getting basic services if they don't have a job. I mean, and they're happy. I mean, right. you want an apocalyptic vision. I'll tell you. You know, having hundreds of thousands of truckers losing their jobs. You know, like what do you think happens in that type of circumstance? Like the I can tell you, like it's not like it's social unrest in a way that. Like not the fun, not like, I mean, it's social unrest. And so the system's needed to make sure folks are happy with this next set of, not just that folks are happy, but, you know, we look at you look at Linux, no one owns Linux. Actually, it's not that no one owns Linux. We all own Linux. Every individual owns the Linux software that they've deployed. They own it. It's legally theirs. That's billions and billions and billions of dollars of intellectual property that they actually own. So in that regard, we should all be pretty darn rich because there's this massive information commons. There's this massive amount of free technology that exists that's worth huge amounts of money. And it's not worth money because, you know, some people pay a $30 monthly fee to access it. It's worth that money because that's how much time it took, how much skilled engineering work it took to produce something that's actually just straight up valuable. And so, you know, we need to start looking at this technology stuff as the, you know, like the open source community is building technology that everyone owns. And so it's not that like people have I'm not saying that people have a right to technology and that's like a government enforced right. Like this is a practical right. This is the reality. And the reality is that anything that's open source is owned by everybody. And if people knew how to leverage open source, use open source to their benefit, then everyone would be really rich. And I think we need to our end game, our goal needs to be people feeling like there's an abundance of resources, like that they've got what they need, that they're happy, and they can pursue self-actualization.
All right. So let's close this out. But final question: what's your thought on Prop 2?
Which one is that? The is that the con?
Yeah.
Whew. I mean, I'm for the con. I understand why people are against it. I mean, the main reason I'm for. I mean, first of all the politicians are against it. All the electeds are against it. So it's got to be a good idea. Some of my least favorite organizations are against it. And so, I like more democracy.
I don't like the fact that the a lot of the unions are in it.
Well, they're against it.
No, they're for it.
Oh no, I think the vast majority of unions are against it.
32 BJ's for it.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I know a lot of the unions are against it because they're afraid that it'll give the opportunity for their pensions to get defunded. But if you look at the thing is, this is the tragedy is that, and I understand the tragedy is that New Yorkers don't have faith in democratic processes. That democratic processes will actually get to positive outcomes because we've been tricked so many times, right. And so people don't want it because they're afraid that on people on the left are afraid that people on the right are going to get a lot of power. People on the right are afraid that people on the left are going to get a lot of power. Folks aren't trusting each other, and we don't have a public consultation. We haven't had experiences of democracy that are really empowering, and so people don't want it. Normally, I think it would be a great idea to have constitutional conventions all the time. If the public were educated, like that public consult. If we had a V Taiwan style process in New York, where people actually understood, felt like understood how they could work with each other to get the results that they want, then I think people would be much more interested in this convention, and I'd be more interested in it. I think everybody would be more interested in it because it would be a great opportunity for us to reform New York State, which in some rankings is one of the most corrupt states in the union. Why are we putting up with such a corrupt system? I mean, there are a lot of corrupt states in the union. I think New York State has had more elected officials put in jail for corruption than any other state. You can't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I read that. I mean, it's corrupt. It's really corrupt. And it's obvious why, there's a lot of reasons why it's corrupt, but one of them is because, New York City's a cash cow and the state's run out of Albany, And so I would love to think that if we had an opportunity to do a constitutional convention, that we would be able to improve things. I think we'd be able to improve them just because things are not good now. And so I think would be able to do well. So that's why I support it.
Alrighty. So Dave, oh my God, Devin.
Happens to me all the time.
Sorry, Devin. I'd like to thank you for coming on. Please, if you're in the New York City area, vote for Devin for New York City Public Advocate on November 7th. If you want to know more, go to twitter.com/Devin
Balkind.
Balkind.
It's tough. It's weird stuff. And let me also say, votedevin.com. That's my website. And a lot of the stuff, I didn't get to talk to talk about it. I've actually built a lot of the things I mentioned here. I mean, some of the things I've built. If you go to votedevin.com/tools, you'll see we built a thing called nyspeaks.org, which is a software application that replicates what's happening in Taiwan for New York City. We built projects.votedevin.com, where that has the entire capital budget that's been scraped off of these big PDF files, put into a database so it's searchable and people can add comments to it. We built services.votedevin.com, which is a web app to show you what government services are available using filters and maps and stuff. It's better than anything the government's got going on. And we built laws.votedevin.com so you can see the laws, you can see the administrative code and the charter in a format that isn't that's usable. And so we're just building stuff over here. That's what I've been hoping. That's how I've been hoping to promote the campaign. I'd say that the press has not been as enthusiastic about my approach as I would like. But yeah, we just build stuff. I mean, that's at the end of the day, we're going to have to produce our way out of all these problems. We can't complain our way out of all these problems. And so yeah, we're just sitting around building better solutions, building alternatives. That's what we do. Votedevin.com, DEVIN.com.
Definitely. All right. Thank you, Devin, for coming on. I would like to thank everyone for listening to today's show. And thank you for listening. And as always, from my house to your house. Mahalo.
Thanks so much, Louis. Thanks.
That's the end of my show. Donk.
Help the Crowd Shot Radio Show grow and thrive by doing something you already do. Shop on Amazon. Amazon always has great deals for whatever you are looking for. From survivalists and riot gear to beanie babies. Next time you're going to shop at Amazon, use my link. The prices stay the same, but I get credit for the sale. Just go to tinyurl.com/LouisB and just shop normally, knowing that you're helping support the Crotch Shot Radio Show. That's tinyurl.com/LouisB.